How is Barry Bonds, Mikey Garcia, Marion Jones, Shane Mosley, Ronnie Coleman, Caleb Plant, Terrence Crawford, and Devin Haney all connected? BALCO ended up being a scandal that had superstar athletes in court as well as trainers to answer questions regarding performance-enhancing drugs. My interest was piqued when I was looking for Shane Mosley material on YouTube. While searching for old articles of Mosley trying to get a sentiment of how people thought of him, I found an article speaking of how notorious BALCO boss Victor Conte named Shane Mosley in his book as an athlete he consulted. A book so controversial that never even published due to potential lawsuits. This book was set to release after Conte had received 4 months in prison. He had pleaded guilty to money laundering and attempting to distribute PEDs. After it came to light that Conte snitched on Mosley, Shane went on the offensive. He decided that he would attack Conte where it hurts most, in court, draining Conte of money, most likely an attorney and legal fees. The origins of BALCO are pre-internet. At the center of this was Victor Conte, a charismatic individual with a self-proclaimed knack to make things work. Conte's story starts in 1950 in Fresno, California. He graduated high school and continued into college competing in track and field, but his cousin convinced him to quit school and start a band. From 1970 to 1984, Conte was a bassist whose career high point was playing with the Tower of Power in 1977. Walking Fish was his stage name, and he is regarded as a talented bassist according to his peers. But Conte had bigger aspirations than the Tower of Power, and he quit the band. He ventured into the business of supplements, a business that can be compared to the murky waters of the Amazon. Conte had taken over Millbrae Holistics, which was a storefront for his wife's business, which would be his first attempt at the supplement business and be a strike. In 1984, Conte would start the company that would end up changing the life of many. He had opened up a lab called Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative, or BALCO for short. BALCO would provide blood analysis to athletes to notice deficiencies in their bodies. Once he figured out what the body lacked in terms of vitamins and minerals, he would suggest supplements that would help him fill in the gaps. And Conte's lab also produced all the vitamins and minerals needed, so the business was ideal. A one-stop shop for high-performance athletes looking to optimize their bodies with the aid of vitamins and minerals. His crown jewel was a product named ZMA, a zinc-magnesium combination that, according to Conte, the formula helped you increase your testosterone while you sleep. It would also aid in sleep and fill in zinc deficiencies that affect 17% of the population. Conte explains that the pivotal moment for him was when one of his athletes tested positive.
Happening! Everybody stay calm!
He was told not to worry about it, that the new management did not mind. And from there on out, Conte went all in using steroids. To him, it was a blessing or a green light to use PEDs. It was a moral dilemma for Conte: cheat and reap the rewards, or continue to work without PEDs and get passed up by everyone else. Conte decided that if you're walking on ice, you might as well dance.
King, I mean, he was the king, bottom line. If you want to cheat and you want to be the best at it, you want to Victor Conte.
Cheating if everybody's doing it. And if you've got the knowledge that that's what everybody's doing, and those are the real rules of the game, then you're not cheating.
He would get his big break with the Stars when Bill Romanowski began to work with Conte. Romanowski was known for being one of the fiercest football players of his time and was just an absolute monster on the field. This attracted many other high-profile athletes to seek his help. Conte began to diversify his portfolio, and his brand, BALCO, did as well. In exchange for his help, athletes would promote products like ZMA. Barry Bonds would post for an ad. Conte's edge came from a product he provided, commonly known as the Clear back in the day. Chemist extraordinaire Patrick Arnold had synthesized THG, aka the Clear, because taking this anabolic steroid under the current guidelines would get you all the gains and never test positive. Investigations, testimonies, and confessions of Conte himself would reveal that athletes would be on a combination of drugs.
What did you give her?
The substance called the Clear, EPO, growth hormone, and insulin.
Conte went further than just providing PEDs. He also admitted to hiring an ex-employee from the testing facilities, so he would be tipped off when they were close to catching him.
The reason that we were able to continue using THG for another year is because I had intelligence from inside the IOC accredited laboratories that they were unable to determine a test.
I don't get it. Why are they confessing? You're not confessing.
They're bragging.
When asked if he ever thought about slowing down, he answered,
Do you not feel any shame?
No, I do not. And I'm gonna go back and say it again. It's not cheating if everyone's doing it.
BALCO was booming by the time they started to get investigated by the feds. Conte had coaches who would recommend him, coaches for the likes of Marion Jones, Shane Mosley, and Tim Montgomery. And in 2003, USADA would begin their own investigation into BALCO when Trevor Graham sent a syringe to an official with the stuff in it. The syringe turned out to be provided by CJ Hunter, a PED using shot putter who just happened to be Marion Jones' husband. Marion Jones was America's biggest track star of her time. Little girls grew up wanting to be just like her. She would go on to be the face of running and the face of women's sports. Jeff Nowitzki would be the man leading the investigation against BALCO. Jeff was a loco. He had grown up in Burlingame and had gone to Mills High in Millbrae. He was a standout high jumper and set the record for a 7 feet high jump. Put a pin in that name because it will be important for many reasons. BALCO would come down in flames shortly after Conte found out the feds were onto him. Claims Jeff Nowitzki illegally looked through his garbage for a year until he had enough evidence to get the green light to take him down.
All of the evidence that was confiscated that day, in my opinion, was collected illegally. There was never a search warrant that was properly served.
The feds were zealous and wanted to make an example of Bonds and Conte. Barry Bonds, in case you didn't know, is a 14-time All-Star, 7-time National League MVP, 8-time Golden Glove winner, 12-time Silver Slugger, 3-time Hank Aaron Award in 2001, 2002, and 2004, an award given to the top hitter of each league, 2-time National Batting Champion, 2-time National Run Leader, held records for 762 home runs and 73 home runs in a single season, batting .863 average slugging percentage in a single season. And that was long. To wrap it up, the man was amazing. His name was linked to BALCO and Conte through his physical trainer, Greg Anderson, who was connected to many other ball players. Anderson would go on to plead guilty on counts of money laundering and steroid distribution. He was the plug for the clear. Bonds, till this day, denies ever being associated with BALCO. Even in his testimony, which was leaked illegally by Conte's lawyer, where Bonds admitted to unknowingly using the cream after his trainer had given it to him. Anyways, that story is a video on its own. In the end, BALCO would be shut down and the names would be leaked. Athletes were disgraced and their records were erased. Conte would go on a media tour like he was promoting a fight. He would go on 2020 to dry snitch on every high-profile athlete he worked with.
Are you saying Marion Jones was a drugs cheat?
Without a doubt. Did the injection with me sitting right there next to her.
Right in front of you?
Right in front of me.
Marion Jones, Tim Montgomery, Kelly White, and Bill Romanowski. Conte revealed that he had them all on a doping program he personally oversaw and tweaked them depending on the athlete. Conte went as far as reading a tell-all book where he would name drop athletes he worked with and tell his side of the story. The book would be so controversial that publishers who planned on releasing it ended up shelving the book and never released it. The book would also see Conte in court against Shane Mosley and Marion Jones, both suing Conte for defamation. Both cases would later be dropped and settled out of court, according to Conte.
Biggest joke of all. You know what that is? I would guesstimate that more than 50% of the athletes are taking some form of anabolic steroids.
Baseball players?
Okay. Absolutely.
More than
without
50%?
A doubt. More than 50%, okay? But I'll tell you something else they're doing that they've never addressed at all, and that's this. My guess is greater than 80% are taking some sort of a stimulant before each and every game. Strength and conditioning coach at the time, Daryl Hudson. We talked, and initially I probably just sent some nutritional supplements. Eventually, he let me know that he and Shane would like to fly up and meet with me. So on Saturday, June 26, 2003, that's what happened. They flew from Southern California up to Oakland Airport. I hear a lot of rumors. You know, you hear things about this guy and that guy, and he had used performance-enhancing drugs before he ever met me. Now, whether that's true again, you know, I don't know. I'm just telling you that's what I do.
Lawyers would upload entire depositions on YouTube where Mosley is pressured to answer questions regarding PEDs, where he admitted using HGH and other PEDs unknowingly. I mean, I'm not going to draw a conclusion, but you can see the videos for yourself. But I think Mosley's biggest issue with Conte is the name dropping him while he's doing his high profile interviews. Conte would go as far as claiming to have shown Mosley how to inject himself correctly, which I assume rubs Mosley in the wrong way.
I came around the desk and he stepped back over here and we sat knee to knee, and I basically showed him specifically how to inject EPO.
But hey, it was your choice to associate yourself with Conte. You now pay the consequences for that decision. Conte would get a deal from the feds and would only plead guilty to 2 of 42 felonies, those being conspiracy to distribute steroids and money laundering. He would serve 4 months in prison in 2005. Other members in BALCO would also be found guilty of other counts and serve prison time. Conte would go on the Joe Rogan Experience and just continue to snitch on as many people as possible. I mean, it's not a good look to keep name dropping those who were caught cheating. Yes, the information is public, but I find it in poor taste due to the controversy and chaos these interviews caused for the athletes. After all, Conte was on the same path as these athletes. They both needed an edge over the competition and decided to cheat to win. But it doesn't mean it's okay to go on a snitching tour to name drop every single athlete you work with. As time passed and the world moved on, Conte once again returned to the old ways. And by that I mean he was back to training and consulting athletes. This time he does it under the name SNAC, which stands for Scientific Nutrition for Advanced Conditioning, a company who supplies supplements to athletes along with workout regimens and advanced training techniques to help maximize performance. Does that sound familiar? Almost sounds like a story I've heard before. Yes, it sounds exactly like what BALCO did, but this time it's without the steroids, and the edge comes from a technique called oxygen modulation. Basically comes down to fighters working out in the gym with these fancy mask intents. The mask supply less oxygen or more oxygen. For example, you can reduce the amount of oxygen you intake to simulate altitude training.
This enables you to train longer at a higher level of intensity.
Best of all, it's clean.
A staple in the boxing world for conditioning gains, a method of training that Conte claims is stupid.
Generation was live high, train high. Well, that really is the worst for you.
Even though he mimics altitude training with his snazzy Rocky mask. These athletes come to Conte for an edge in training, but he's using methods Ivan Drago used in the Rocky movie, meaning the edge is gone. The methods and technology is old, from the 1980s, but I digress. At this time, I would like to remind you that Conte is not a sports scientist. He is not a doctor, even though he claims that Nike called him their doctor.
At Marion, we went to this hotel, we had this meeting. I explained to them, listen, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a PhD or an MD, but I can explain all this to you. One was an MD and the other was a PhD. And they talked to them to see if they could present this information. Well, we don't care, you're our doctor.
This guy gets it. Conte's biggest success came when he connected with Patrick Arnold. Conte never competed in sports other than high school. He never trained a champion from scratch. So I asked fighters, what edge does Conte provide? Is it his super high-tech fancy material? Is it his super high-tech fancy gym with the wall of shame and fancy plastic tents? He's got a bag, a ring, a bike, a tent, and even some weights, and even an oxygen mask. I mean, compared to the UFC, I'll let you be the judge. I wouldn't hold my breath while you look for a good answer. Life after BALCO has been business as usual minus the cheating, Conte said. He's back to helping athletes. Patrick Arnold, on the other hand, did 3 months in prison for conspiracy to distribute steroids. He would also continue to work as a chemist, and this time for a more noble purpose, working with Dom D'Agostino to further the research in the new field of ketogenics, a field where medical advancements are helping kids with epilepsy to control or even in some cases completely stop seizures. Marion Jones would go on and have a whirlwind of a fallout. She would continue to deny the use of PEDs into 2007. She would admit to using PEDs prior to the 2000 Summer Olympics. She would be stripped of all of her medals from 2000 and onwards. Jones would also go broke and even sell her mom's home to stay afloat. She had gone from one of the first, if not the first, millionaire female track athlete to a tarnished athlete and a liar in the eye of many. She would serve 6 months in prison for her charges. Barry Bonds would go on to fight in court that he never used PEDs, even though it was leaked that he admitted using a lotion who his trainer supplied who was directly connected to Conte. Then there's the man of the hour. Today, he runs a super gym for the top fighters in boxing. The company SNAC, that many of you are probably familiar with, is Conte's new baby. What I find interesting when doing research for this episode was this one coincidence. And wouldn't you know it, Conte, a man who built a career on navigating the gray waters of track and field, found himself in boxing with the grayest of waters, a sport that has no actual governing entity. So the rules and regulations for boxing change from state to state. This is true about drug testing for PEDs as well. Most of the time, fighters must write it into their contract, but unless you're competing in the Olympics, it's unlikely to get tested into a high-profile fight. The perfect place to become a white knight for the war against PEDs. He would go on the Joe Rogan Experience and say he was consulted by VADA to consult on details regarding testing and procedures. Who else to consult but the most prolific cheat of his era? But this to me did not seem right. In the end, Conte is no chemist, and for as much as he likes saying that Nike said he was,
well, we don't care, you're our doctor.
He lacks the actual knowledge and skills of a chemist. He flexes a vocabulary to confuse people and make himself sound educated. But in truth, Conte is nothing more than a great salesman with great charisma. He's a fun guy to listen to, and the constant name dropping and snitching will have you rewinding sections of his interviews, because you just can't believe that this guy just said what he said. Patrick Arnold was the true genius, and this is shown in his work. He synthesized the majority of the substances that went undetected. He would go on to be known as the godfather of pro-hormones due to the success of his supplements in the bodybuilding community. And in present day, he's still working synthesizing molecules that once seemed impossible. So why would VADA go talk to Conte and not Arnold? Did they really want help in testing, or did they want to know who else Conte had on the payroll? VADA would go on multiple articles and interviews to clear the air. They would go on to distance themselves from Conte. In most recent years, Conte has gone on the record to say that he personally paid for VADA testing of his fighters, adding further fuel to the fire. Many people online question the nature of the transaction. Since VADA does not disclose the amounts given by Conte, many question if he should even be paying for it. Nonetheless, fighters still come to him for help and hope to one day be in the contest of hopefully Wall of Shame? No, wait, Wall of Fame, right? I think it's a Wall of Fame they want to be on. Mikey Garcia, Devin Haney, Sean Porter, Caleb Plant, Danny Jacobs, Andre Berto, and Mario Barrios all work with Conte for reasons that elude me, to be honest. They all wear the gear and talk about how great his supplements are, just like BALCO athletes did back in the day. Conte's edge is that he can fill holes in nutrition that will aid in performance, in addition to oxygen modulation training, aka high altitude training, with a spin, a problem that a dietitian can fix for you if nutrition is your biggest concern. After all, food is the best source of nutrients and minerals since they are the most bioavailable source for them. Oxygen modulation training is maybe a slight edge, but similar advantages can be gained by training at high altitude. And finally, Conte is not a fighter and never even been around a ring until he decided to become the white knight against PEDs in boxing. His only boxer we know he worked with was Shane Mosley, and he was providing him with PEDs. For Conte, this is not about fighters or about sports, it's about having fun. After all, it's his life motto. He snitched on everyone he has worked with continuously, and even till this day exhibits with no remorse for playing a part in defrauding the public. I don't know about y'all, but this is not the person I would like to work with. Last but not least, I ask athletes watching this, why would you ever take a risk to associate yourself with such a controversial character? His methods are outdated and his experience in the sport is minimal. He comes with baggage as if you were boarding a flight to Mexico. I just don't get it. Specifically with athletes involved in BALCO claiming in many occasions that they were unaware the lotion or injections were PEDs. Mosley said he thought they were vitamins. But it's hard to think that all of these athletes were naive as well. In the end, I end up with more questions than answers. Why does anyone work with this man? Why don't UFC fighters work with him? Why is he harassing people online? Don't his stable of fighters require attention? The parallels in BALCO and SNAC are enough to raise concerns. They both offer help to athletes to improve performance through science and vitamins. Only this time, Conte is a good guy, not a bad guy. In his world, he is the loudest voice against PEDs in boxing, and his state-of-the-art gym offers training you can't find anywhere else in the world. The biggest question is, why does the the boxing community even allow this man to be involved in such a degree? He's entitled to redemption, and I'm not one to determine what would define that, but I do think he has no place in professional sport training where he aided cheating and corruption. Conte ultimately stopped because he got caught, not because he had a change of heart. Just listen to the Joe Rogan Experience podcast on Spotify and listen to himself admit it. Yet, fighters still think they need his help.